Well, welcome to lesson 21, processing arrays, which just means working with arrays. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to print an array and also how to use for loops with arrays. To start with, I want to go back to the worksheet that you worked on last week and talk about a few of the answers. Okay, as a quick review of how to create an array, so I'm going to create an array that's made up of doubles. I'm going to call it cell bills, and I want 5 numbers. Now I'm not going to create any numbers to start with. I'm just going to say my array has a length of 5. Now, once I create that, somewhere else in my program, I can assign values to the array. To do that, I use the name of my array and then which index I want to put the number in. And once I have a number chosen, let me grab my pen here, I can just put a number in it. So let's say my first cell phone bill is $120. And my next one is $95. And that's how I create an array. That's how I can put values into the array. Another way to create an array is if I already know the values, I'm going to call it create doubles. I'm going to call my array just A. And using the curly braces, I actually put the values in to start with. Now, I threw something at you in that worksheet without telling you what it meant, kind of to push you, see if you could figure it out. It was this array.length. That is a property that will tell you how many elements are in the list. So in this list or array, I have 1, 2, 3. So the length is 3. Now, don't get that confused with the index. The index starts at, I'm not sure why my page is moving around, starts at 0, 1, and 2. But the length, there are 3. 1, 2, 3 elements in the array. So let's look at how we work with arrays and the elements in it. All right, when we're working with arrays, very often you are going to use for loops to process these arrays. Now the reason is because one, all the elements are of the same type, and we typically want to do the same thing to each element. This could be reading in 100 different numbers, printing out all the numbers, adding 20 to every number. And we also know the size of the loop because we know the size of the array. So that makes it perfect sense to use a for loop because we know exactly how many times we have to go through the for loop. All right, we're going to go through a couple examples of some different for loops. So the first thing I need to do is to create an array. So let's create an array called my list. It's going to have doubles and there's going to be 10 elements. All right, I'm going to ask the user to enter 10 values. So since I'm going to read in 10 different numbers from the keyboard, I'm going to do this in a for loop. So I pose my question, enter 10 values to the user. And then inside a for loop, I have my int I equals 0. So this is my index. I'm going to start it at 0 until I is less than my list.length, and then I'm going to increment I by 1 each time. So inside my for loop, I have my array name, and then I have I. Okay, this stands for my index, so keep in mind, okay, it starts out as 0, and so the first input that I read, here's my scanner, the first input I read is going to go into the array as index 0. Now I'm going to come up here and say I++, so I is equal to 1 now, and so when it comes back into the loop, this is my list, the array, but now the index is a 1 because I incremented it over here. And the next input goes into index 1, and so forth all the way through. Index 9 is the last one, and once it becomes 10, it's equal to the length, and then we're done with the for loop. All right, another time that you're going to want to use a for loop with an array is to print an array. Unfortunately, Java does not have an easy way to just say, hey, print this array, print every number in this array. You actually have to use a for loop to print out every index. There's some other languages like Python that have an easy command to just say, hey, print the array and it will print everything. But software programs, or I should say programming languages like Python, they are easier to code in for some people, but Python tends to be much slower than Java. And so we're starting to see programmers going back to Java when they're coding something that needs to be run very quickly. So when you want to print an array, you must use a for loop. Okay, so if you don't hear anything else in this lesson, when you want to print an array, you must use a for loop. Again, initialize I to 0, I is less than mylist.length, increment by 1, and I have system.out.print my array name. Okay, and then index, I'm going to use I because I is starting at 0. So it gives us whatever number is in index 0, loops back around, and then whatever number is in index 1, and it keeps looping around. All right, we're going to go through some examples. Now, if we'd been in class together, I would have had you opened up Eclipse, and I'd give you these commands and then show you the answers to give you practice. What you might want to do here, if you can pause the video and open up Replit and practice coding before I show you the answer on the video, or if you have a notebook handy, you might try to code it by hand on paper before you see the answer. So if you'd like to do that, then just stop the video before the answer is shown. So the first thing I want you to do is create a class called Lesson Arrays. And I want you then to create an array of length 5 with values 1 to 5. So it will contain the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I want you to print the array to the console. So see if you can do that based on the information that you've heard in this video so far. All right, let's check your answers. So since I want the values 1 to 5, those would be integers. I called the array mylist, you can call it whatever you'd like, and I put in the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now to print it to the console, I must use a for loop. And I initialized I to be 0, I is less than mylist.length, I++, and then inside my for loop I have the system.out.print, my array name with the index I, because I is changing, and then I put a space so the numbers wouldn't be run together. Okay, now I want you to modify the code so that it prints every other element. So originally we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but now I want the output just to print out the 1, the 3, and the 5. So see if you can figure out how to change your code. There's only one thing you have to change to make this happen. All right, so let's see the answer here. So the only thing we had to do here was change our incrementing to change I to plus equals 2. So it starts out at 0, so it will print out the 1, and then it's going to increase by 2, which will come over here, and then increase by another 2 and print out the 5. Okay, now I want you to go back and change your code to I++, so it's printing out every element, not every other element. Okay, in a separate for loop, I want you to add 10 to each element. All right, so in your code, you already have this first part, create an array. And down here below, you have print the array to the console. All right, in between those, I want you to use a for loop to add 10 to each element in the array. Now, we want to keep in mind that maybe we don't know these numbers in advance. So how could we add 10 to every element in the array? All right, well, let's take a look at a possible solution. So here we have a for loop, and again, all this is the same. And when we go into the for loop, I'm going to have my array, index I, so that starts at 0, and I have this plus equals 10. So that's adding 10 to whatever number is stored in that index. Now, there's another possibility. If you don't like using the plus equals, another way you could write this is my list index I equals my list index I plus 10. So that's another possible way rather than using the plus equals. All right, so keep in mind that when we're adding 10, whether it's this way or the plus equals, we are not adding 10 to I. Okay, this refers to the array at index, let's just say it's at index 0 to start with, the array at index 0. So what is the value? This represents the value at index 0. So that value plus equals 10. So that value itself plus 10. So we see that here, the value at that index equals the value at that index plus 10. So we're adding 10 to this value, and then it is storing it in that index. So the code then would print out 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, since we started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And notice that 10 have been added to each number. All right, so remember, to print an array, you have to use a for loop. And typically you're going to use a for loop anytime you want to do the same thing to every element in the array. So you're going to get some more practice with that with assignment 21.